Today I'm honored and really proud to be the first president to stand with you here at the White House to address the 45th March for Life.
A rallying cry in Washington, D.C. President Trump makes history addressing tens of thousands who came from far and wide to support life.
We are one of only 4 countries in the world that allow elective abortion at any time for any reason.
Pro-life vote. Senator Ben Sasse supports voting on a bill protecting babies from pain. Will his colleagues pass it? The Pope in Peru. The Holy Father continues his 6-day trip to South America and talks about one of his favorite subjects, a pet project. Animals across Italy receive a gift this week. On EWTN News Nightly on this March for Life Day, Friday, January 19th, 2018.
You come from many backgrounds, many places, but you all come for one beautiful cause: to build a society where life is celebrated, protected, and cherished.
For the first time in history, a sitting president addresses the March for Life in Washington, D.C. and stands up for the sanctity of life. His speech from the Rose Garden, where he was flanked by pro-life families, received thunderous applause from marchers who came from around the nation. Good evening from Washington, D.C. on this March for Life Day. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Since 1973, abortion has claimed the lives of 60 million Americans. Pro-lifers gathered in Washington today to mark the landmark decision by the Supreme Court that made it legal. White House correspondent Mark Irons was in the Rose Garden for the president's remarks. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. I witnessed a burst of approving applause throughout President Trump's message today, not only from the pro-life youth that joined him in the Rose Garden, but also from the massive crowd outside the gates of the White House gathering for the March for Life. Today, they made their voices loud and clear, and the president gave them lots to cheer about.
Every child is a precious gift from God.
1 year since taking office, and the president couldn't be more popular with his pro-life base.
Under my administration, we will always defend the very first right in the Declaration of Independence, and that is the right to life.
The president condemned late-term abortions, calling on the Senate to pass the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy.
Pass this important law and send it to my desk for signing.
He touted his efforts on economic growth before turning to pro-life accomplishments, including creating an administration department that protects healthcare workers who don't want to perform abortions, reinstating the Mexico City policy, and allowing states to defund abortion providers.
This movement can only succeed with the heart and the soul and the prayer of the people.
And here in the Rose Garden, the president highlighted one woman's personal pro-life story. Marianne Donadio found herself in a crisis pregnancy as a teen.
Mariana bravely chose life and soon gave birth to her son.
She now runs a maternity home for homeless pregnant women in Greensboro, North Carolina.
There are people all across the country that are working hard to support women, to give them, what they need to be able to choose life for their children.
Marianne says she was moved by today's Rose Garden event, and she hopes it propels the pro-life movement. President Trump said the gift of life gives purpose to today's march.
That is why we march. That is why we pray. And that is why we declare that America's future will be filled with goodness, peace, joy, dignity, and life for every child of God.
President Trump issued a proclamation declaring Monday National Sanctity of Human Life Day. He says it affirms that all life is sacred and that every person has inherent dignity and worth. I should mention there were a handful of pro-abortion protesters out in the March for Life crowd today. Lauren.
I talked to some people who saw just a few. Thank you, Mark. White House correspondent Mark Irons. Also in the Rose Garden today, Kellyanne Conway, advisor to the president. She tweeted her thanks to the president earlier this week, saying, "At POTUS will make history as first president to deliver live video remarks from Rose Garden to March for Life, now in its 45th year. Hashtag pro-life, hashtag thank you. And joining us now is Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president and a pro-life Catholic. The president always has not been pro-life. Why did the president want to do this?
It was just a remarkable day here today, very moving to be in the Rose Garden with President Trump, who, as you know, made history by being the first president in the United States to address the March for Life live. He did that through video, live remarks by satellite feed. And I think his message certainly was for the brave men and women on the Mall marching for the 45th consecutive year, Lauren, but it was also a message to the country and to the world that he is a pro-life president and will continue to be through 2018. He made very clear today that if the United States Senate follows the U.S. House and puts on President Trump's desk pain-capable bill, he will sign it into law. That means no abortions after 20 weeks. You know, the abortion anyone, anytime, anywhere, abortion on demand crowd, they won't give in to any reasonable restrictions on abortions. And a majority of Americans, including many pro-choicers, they say that abortions after 20 weeks should not be had in this country. Nonpartisan scientists and doctors say a fetus can feel pain by that point, if not well before, and that we just don't need that procedure in this nation. The president agrees, and he would make that the law if the Senate, in fact, follows suit with the House.
We saw a very compassionate moment today when the president kissed a child with Down syndrome after the ceremony. People don't always see that side of him.
Well, I do, and those of us, and people should look for it. They don't have to look very far. He loves being with children. He loves when families come to visit. He really loves, because he took his case to the American people. He loves now when the American people come to their house, the White House, and take their case to him. I would say that those are some of the most poignant and positive and uplifting moments for President Trump as president. It's when he's had these roundtable discussions or these large or small group gatherings of Americans who talk about everything from how his new Tax Cut and Jobs Act will impact them, to thanking him for being such an outwardly spoken and active and successful pro-life president, to what his HHS Bureau did just yesterday, which is to have a new conscience protection and religious freedom office so that people who object to certain medical procedures and abortifacients, for example, will not be compelled to perform them or dispense them against their religious conscience. And so he always enjoys it. I met that same young woman, Nicole, last night at a reception hosted by Vice President and Mrs. Pence, and got to speak with Nicole and her mother and her family. And it's just always so moving to see people come here from all over the country, if not from other countries, to come every January on a cold day. They're there regardless, and they finally have relief in the White House. They have somebody who's listening, who hears them, who sees them, and who agrees with them that we need to build a culture of life.
How many more pro-life accomplishments like those you mentioned can we see, Kellyanne?
Well, it could be another busy year of progress for the pro-life movement. Much of that rests in the House and the Senate as well. But we feel heartened that this past year the House did go ahead and pass the pain-capable bill, ending abortion at 20 weeks. We feel good that the culture of life is being I would say, bolstered by more and more Americans say they're against late-term abortions. They are appalled by sex selection abortions. When the president said today, we are one of 7 countries, along with North Korea and China, that allows these type of abortions, that has to stop. And this president also is making increasing moves to upend the Obama legacy of abortion anytime, anywhere, and also of shoveling so much money to Planned Parenthood. This president has said, why would the nation's largest abortion provider receive $500 million a year? So much of that money now, the states can decide whether to send it to a women's health center that provides mammograms, for example. Planned Parenthood doesn't, and that women's health center does not provide abortions, and Planned Parenthood certainly does. It's the nation's largest abortion provider, and that's quite a cash cow for them. And Lauren, this country is very wise to the fact that Planned Parenthood is not just the nation's largest abortion provider, but one of the nation's largest, most active, most prodigious political donors and political operations. They have a full-on political operation at Planned Parenthood, and yet they're taking $500 million in taxpayer money.
Thank you so much for joining us. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president and a pro-life Catholic.
Thank you, Lauren. God bless you.
Kellyanne mentioned the 20-week abortion ban, and today President Trump said if it came to his desk, he would sign it into law. While the House has passed it, it's unlikely to pass the Senate. Correspondent Mark Irons asked the White House Director of Legislative Affairs about the bill during a briefing on another subject, the potential government shutdown.
The pain-capable 20-week abortion ban has been fast-tracked in the Senate. When do you expect a vote, and why does the White House want to vote if it's likely to die?
I think this administration has continued to defend life from the very beginning. The vice president last year was the first vice president to speak to the March for Life. The president is hosting people here to protect life. It's an important issue for this administration. You saw with reversal of Mexico City policy, the president has looked to make sure that we are making sure that taxpayer dollars are not used overseas to fund abortions. That is a commitment of this administration. We don't have a date as to when the Senate will vote, but to your question about whether or not it fails or passes, we think it's important for this administration to be on record in support of life.
On Capitol Hill, meanwhile, lawmakers engaged in a fierce debate over a bill to protect babies who survive an abortion. It's called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us with the feisty action on the floor. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The Born Alive Survivors Protection Act would require a doctor to save the life of a baby after a failed abortion. If not, they risk fines and up to 5 years in prison. I met a woman from Missouri who came to Congress to lobby lawmakers on an issue that's very personal to her.
You could call Melissa Ohden's birth miraculous, but surviving an abortion wasn't the end of her battle for life.
Unfortunately, after I survived, there was a demand made to leave me to die at that hospital. And I don't know how much that fight cost someone, but I can tell you that I now know that there was a nurse who was not willing to just leave me there to die and actually rushed me off to the NICU that day.
40 years later, she shares her survival story with lawmakers as the House debates a bill to ensure doctors treat babies who survive abortion and rush them to the hospital.
I believe it is only fitting that we take action today here in the House of Representatives to defend the defenseless.
Democrats say the law is unnecessary.
Of course, infants born alive deserve health care. Of course, if a baby is born alive, everything must be done to protect that life.
It has always been the law that healthcare providers cannot deliberately harm newborn infants.
But the House passed the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act with a comfortable margin.
The yeas are 241 and the nays are 183. The bill is passed.
It's a victory for Ohden, who founded the Abortion Survivors Network.
This is just basic human rights. Children who survive abortions, children like me, are human beings who, deserve that right to live.
In the Senate, pro-life senators are urging Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to publicly say when he'll call for a vote on a different bill, the 20-week abortion ban. But right now, the Senate is scrambling to stop a government shutdown tonight. Lauren?
Well, it does shut down in just a few hours. Democrats promising to filibuster a bill to keep the government open for 4 weeks. They failed to reach a deal for Dreamers. Those are those immigrants who were brought illegally to the country as children. Does it seem like a 5-day extension could be in the works?
Well, the president delayed a weekend trip to Florida. He summoned the top Democrat, Chuck Schumer, to the White House in an attempt to reach a deal. Now, after that meeting, Schumer said they made some progress, but still have a good number of disagreements. It all hangs in the balance. But I know Senator John McCain on a previous issue said nothing leads indecisiveness in Congress, helps heal that indecisiveness better than a weekend looming.
Right. What happens, though, if the government shuts down?
Well, this would be the first government shutdown since 2013. You remember Tea Party Republicans led the charge at that time against Obamacare. Now, when the clock strikes midnight, many civilian government employees, many of them, will be barred from working. That's hundreds of thousands. But vital government services will continue, like food inspections, TSA screenings, and also the military.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Pope Francis travels to the Amazon rainforest. He calls the area the lungs of our planet and demands an end to the exploitation of its timber, gas, and gold. The Holy Father also meets with indigenous people and asks governments to respect their rights, cultures, and traditions.
Por la defensa de la vida, defensa de la tierra y defensa de las culturas.
After his speech, the Pope met a man who was paralyzed after being shot by police during a protest. He is given a headdress and necklace of native beads. The Catholic Church maintains a strong presence in the region, though one local official says a growing number of indigenous men and women identify as evangelicals. Coming up, continuing our March for Life coverage. We are with Alabama students who played an important role. And science on our side. We discuss advances that have boosted the pro-life movement. For many marchers, the day began with Mass at the Capital One Arena downtown. Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Archbishop of Washington, led the celebration at the home of the city's sports arena. Busloads of students came from around the country, and that includes the Archdiocese of Mobile, Alabama. More than 100 participated in every aspect of the march from start to finish. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby was with them and reports.
Leading this year's March for Life, dozens of young people from Montgomery, Alabama, an honor for students who had never been.
I think pro-life is a really big deal, and a ton of my friends from church always told me that I should go. So this year I decided this was the year for me to try it.
People say that when you come, it's a whole new experience, and I've never really experienced stuff like this with my church.
Samantha Hodge traveled almost 15 hours by bus to reach Washington, D.C.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
She and her classmates started their morning with tens of thousands of others who attended the Mass for Life. From there, they split into groups to participate in all the day's events.
Over 160 students and teachers from the Archdiocese of Mobile are here. Some are here at the rally, others are leading the march itself, and others are at the Rose Garden.
Paige Renfro was invited to the White House to watch the historic moment when President Trump addressed the March for Life.
This is the first time that's happened. It's really monumental to be able to attend that. Each trip I have something different, like the Mass for Life has been impactful each year.
Paige says over the past 3 years, she's seen the number of young people from her state grow. The Archbishop of Mobile is proud of his Catholic schools and parishes who year after year fill busloads of students.
It's so critical because we come in here today, it's more about, it's not just for, kids, it's for everything. It's about life in general and how we need to come together.
A message they're passing on to the entire nation. At the March for Life in Washington, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Those kids looked so excited. That's just great. Well, last night I had the pleasure of emceeing a reception highlighting pro-life healthcare. The event, sponsored by Solidarity Health Share, honored healthcare providers who offer innovative solutions. The keynote speaker says the pro-life movement is backed by science.
To be pro-life is to be pro-science. The science of embryology has established that from the very moment of conception, we are unique, distinct, living, and whole human beings.
Dr. Peter Morrow joins us now. He's a practicing physician and president of the Catholic Medical Association. That's an organization of healthcare professionals. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
You did a great job last night, by the way. Let's talk about that science behind all of this. We've seen all of the wonderful emotion pouring out from everybody. We heard the President Trump's speech. We heard the Vice President. Paul Ryan was there. But the science is where we get tripped up on our differences.
Yes.
Tell us, when can babies feel pain? And there's a whole branch devoted to this kind of study. Let's talk about that.
Lauren, to be pro-life is to be pro-science. And, from conception to birth, there's a natural development. At about 20 weeks, there is a lot of data that shows that the nervous system is developed enough that they can not only feel pain, but joy. So, to ban abortions at that point really makes perfect medical sense.
Yesterday, we talked about this. The HHS actually opened a new division for conscience protection rights that helps doctors and nurses who do not want to participate in abortions. How is this going to impact Catholic medical professionals?
We're very thankful that now there is some conscience protection for healthcare workers and physicians, because without conscience protection, we really only have two choices: either leave the practice of medicine or, alter your conscience. And neither one of those suggestions are possible. So we're very thankful that now we have an opportunity to hear our voice heard if we have any impingement on our conscience.
When they announced that yesterday, they said that just in the last year alone, there have been 34 conscience protection people who are coming up and saying, I need protection from having to do this. And that there were 10 in the last decade, which I find remarkable. It's an issue that keeps moving forward. Do you hear from those doctors and nurses? Tell me about that.
You do. There are several physicians and nurse practitioners that are given options of either leaving or, compromising their conscience. Fortunately, we work with legal firms that can help defend that, and we have filed many amicus briefs with the court protecting conscience protection.
What's your advice for them?
Hang in there.
Okay, hang in there.
Help is coming.
The cavalry's on its way?
Help is coming. But even despite this help, Lauren, the evil is still out there. Evil that seeks, to eclipse the sense of God in the practice of medicine. This is wonderful, but we still have to keep going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Morrow from the Catholic Medical Association.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, greetings from Peru. Pope Francis sends a pro-life message from deep in the Amazon. And Animal Farm. The celebration of a saint in Rome transforms St. Peter's Square. As we mentioned earlier, Pope Francis is in Peru, but he sent a tweet from the Amazon just before the March for Life started, saying, quote, "Every life counts, from the beginning to the end, from conception to natural death." Earlier this week, animals received blessings all over Italy to mark the feast day of St. Anthony Abbot, one of the patron saints of animals. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley takes us to one of those celebrations.
In full ceremonial garb, officers from Italy's different police forces ride majestically towards the Vatican. A special mass honoring the Egyptian-born patron saint of animals, St. Anthony Abbot, is being celebrated inside St. Peter's. The animals and their riders wait patiently for an annual blessing that'll come next.
For the first time in the 11 years since this event has been taking place, the cavalry that guard the Quirinale, the palace of the Italian president, are here in all their finery. A blessing made all the more special by the fact this year the honor guards on horseback are celebrating their 150th anniversary.
Horsemen from Tuscany are also on hand. Lidio Ludovisi tells me he last came to the piazza with his horse when John Paul II was Pope. He says he's thrilled to be back. It's not every day you get to ride your horse into St. Peter's Square. The Italian Breeders' Association has brought an array of farm animals to the square. It's a chance to showcase their livestock. But many here worry about the future of their industry. Riccardo Santacroce, a Tuscan farmer, is one of them. Young people no longer want to go into the trade, he says. They don't want to get their hands dirty, and they hate not being able to take a vacation. You have no days off when you raise animals, he tells me. Then the moment everyone has been awaiting.
E la benedizione di Dio Onnipotente, Padre e Figlio e Spirito Santo.
Cardinal Angelo Comastri blesses the animals and their owners. It's a simple ceremony, but one that the priest in charge of St. Peter's Basilica carries out with great zeal every year. At the Vatican, Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly.
I'm tempted to moo or bleat or something, but I'll spare you all of that. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We will be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. And we leave you tonight with more video of today's March for Life in Washington, D.C. Good night, and God bless you. Shalom.